My name's Josh. I'm a co-host on The Imperfects, the son of Sri Lankan and English immigrants, and I grew up on and am now raising my children on Wurundjeri country. I'd like to recognise the traditional peoples of this continent whose land was stolen nearly 250 years ago. In particular, we at The Imperfects would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm inspired by the strength and endurance of the world's oldest living culture, and we at The Imperfects pay homage to the traditions of story when we share stories on our podcast.
Hello, I'm English Accent, and welcome to the Academy of Imperfection, where experts in their field share their wisdom on the subject of imperfection. Today, psychotherapist and world-renowned relationship guru Esther Perel elegantly demystifies the mysteries of our relationships.
One of the nice, if you want, imperfections in love relationships is that the very thing that was initially attractive is often the very thing that becomes the source of conflict later.
Yeah.
So join students Ryan and Josh as they drink a warm pint of knowledge in this Academy of Imperfection.
Well, we promised, we said to everyone that the year was over. We said, we've made such a deal about it. We've said multiple times now, there's no more episodes for the year, but we continue to release episodes. And when this came up, well, there was no way we couldn't do it. So the only thing to mention is Josh, obviously. Yeah. It's just the two of us with
I think this is the first time ever. It's just been you and me on the mic without Hugh.
It's essentially like, it's like watching an episode of Seinfeld with no Jerry.
It is.
You know?
Yeah.
You'd be like watching it, it's like, why isn't Jerry there? But it's like, but the good news is that we do have an Elaine, I guess, in this episode. So we have Esther Perel, which is hugely thrilling. And Esther, we will talk to you very, very soon. I want to ask you so many things. I'll read a quick intro for people. So
wait. I'll sit here and let you guys banter away. Keep going. I'm learning.
We have a finite amount of time, so we probably should stop bantering. Okay, for those who don't know, Esther Perel is a psychotherapist and New York Times bestselling author who is recognized as one of the most insightful and original voices on modern relationships. She's fluent in 9 languages, helms a therapy practice in New York City, and serves as an organizational consultant for Fortune 500 companies around the world. Her celebrated TED Talks have garnered more than 40 million views, and her international best-selling Mating in Captivity, Unlocking Erotic Intelligence became a global phenomenon translated into 30 languages. Her newest book is the New York Times bestseller, The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity, and her latest project, Where Should We Begin? A Game of Stories with Esther Perel, is a card game designed to foster connection and unlock the storyteller within. Esther is also an executive producer and the host of the popular podcast, Where Should We Begin?, which is also the most recommended and talked about podcast by my girlfriend, Jam, who ironically would have ended the relationship with me if I didn't take this opportunity to speak with Esther Perel. Esther, so lovely to meet you.
Wonderful addition to my bio.
Well,
I'll take it along.
It's true. When I said to Jam, my partner, I said, "You're not going to believe this. There's a chance we're going to talk to Esther Perel." She said, "No way." She was like, "No way." She dropped her phone. She said, "This is it." She said, "This is it."
Should have asked her to come instead of you.
Oh, she would have done a far better job, no doubt. Anyway, Esther, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's your work is just so helpful to us and to my girlfriend, and I know for so many other people. I feel like a good place to begin is our podcast is about imperfection and embracing imperfection in people. In individuals, and for the people who come on our podcast, they talk about why they're imperfect. But I thought maybe like a good place to start with you is to talk about imperfections within relationships. And I feel like we see so much perfection in perceived perfection in other people's relationships, and we end up comparing our own relationships to theirs and put probably unnecessary expectations on ourselves and on our partner, and they no doubt have their own problems.
I would love to apply to relationships a definition of perfection or confidence that my friend Terry Real gives. And he says, confidence is our ability to see ourselves as flawed and still hold ourselves in high regard.
Mm-hmm.
Perfection or a good relationship is the ability to see it as flawed and still hold it in high regard. This pursuit of perfection in ourselves or in relationships is really taking us in a very bad direction. And I can trace it all the way to the mental health crisis that we are so fondly talking about these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's my entry point into your question. By definition, relationships are imperfect, and so are people.
Yeah.
I remember it's going to be very hard, as we were saying on the car on the way here, not to just reflect our own relationships in this
It's
discussion.
unavoidable, please do.
Yeah, but I remember reading a book years ago. It was a Malcolm Gladwell book, and there was discussions in there of about relationships and the flaws within relationships. And I remember having a visceral reaction of not wanting to go any further in the book because I didn't want to admit that there were any flaws. And it was like, if I start admitting flaws, what does that say about the relationship? And there's a panic there of what, like unraveling a jumper. And can I relate? Because I love this relationship, I don't want it to end, so I don't want to even look at any of the flaws. Can denial be a big part of this for people?
Well, one way to look at it would be to say that love always comes with a healthy amount of self-deception and denial. If you had to really see the truth in its stark contrasts in front of you all the time, you know, no, maybe we would never stay with each other. So by definition, love is a fiction filled with denial and filled with self-aggrandizement, especially in the beginning. Nascent love is filled with, you know, unrealistic, magical perfection, for that matter. And magical perfection is something that is part of our developmental arc. Young children must experience magical perfection. It is but part of becoming an adult is actually the undoing of magical thinking and the ability to see the magic even within the confines of reality.
So when you say the magic, do you mean that the unique moments, or?
The magic is the mysterious, the surprising, the serendipitous, the unending, the twists and turns of things that you thought would take you in one direction and they in fact take you in a completely different direction. That happenstance.
So in a relationship, if someone inevitably makes a mistake and maybe betrays trust or does something, whether it's a lapse of judgment quickly or whether it's a long-term affair or something happens within the relationship, but at the end of once it's done, assuming that the person who made the mistake regrets it and wants to get the relationship back on track, how do we bounce back from a mistake within a relationship? I know it probably changes, but you just made me think of it then when you said like surprises or unpredictable things. Something can be going so well, a relationship can be, at least to one person, it can be seemingly perfect and there's nothing to worry about. And then bang, something gets revealed or something happens that is unpredictable.
But even in the way you're asking your question, everything could be going on perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
and suddenly something gets revealed. Everything is going on swell, and I suddenly got jolted out of magical thinking, what we call in my language primary naivete. You know, this notion that everything is perfect, nothing can go wrong. That is denial.
Yeah.
That is, in the world of adults, that is denial, that is self-deception. Part of our struggle as adults is to know that at any moment shit can happen. But we learn to live.
Yes.
You know, it's what's called by Brecker, The Denial of Death, one of the most important books ever written. You know, a kid doesn't know they could die at any moment. Yeah. An adult does.
Yeah.
Now, they could die any moment, could be that they could lose a person, that they could be losing a job, that bad things can happen, including that your partner could leave you. This is actually part of our awareness in reality that grounds us into life's imperfections. So when you talk about, I thought everything was great and suddenly you lied to me,
So then is it that it's actually the framework in which we're looking at a relationship which can affect how we respond to these unpredictable things?
Completely. Completely. The framework determines how you're going to interpret all the breaches, all the lies, all the betrayals, all the disappointments. The frame is the lens that is going to give meaning to your experience.
And hence it would be almost impossible to react in a adult and helpful manner if you haven't had the framework right from the beginning.
Right. And
You're
the
destined to
framework,
fail.
that doesn't mean it won't hurt.
Yeah.
The fact that I know my partner could lie to me, or my partner could do things that would be hurtful to me, or the fact that we hurt people we love, that is a given. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to hurt me less when you do it, but it's not going to make me feel like I've just landed on another planet.
Yes. So that I guess the denial of death, which is the denial of bad things happening, if we approach a relationship or our life like that, then when the bad thing does happen, it's like complete shock and almost is there an entitlement in feeling like that shouldn't happen to you?
Sometimes people say that. This should not happen to me. I did everything to prevent such a thing.
Yeah.
I built a whole castle around me for such thing never to happen. How dare it life you? In the adult world, it's like if you drive. Some people enter a car and have never thought that they could actually have an accident. Some people drive a car and all they say is, I've never had an accident. But so do all the people who just had one.
Yeah, yeah.
And some people, don't even think about it because they think that nothing can happen to them. They're invincible.
Yeah.
Part of becoming an adult is to become aware of your fragility, is to know that things can happen to you when you least expect it. That's a thing that no child has to live with. In real childhood, when there is no trauma, you live with that awareness that nothing bad can happen. That is the naivete of the child. And becoming an adult is to live with that awareness. I call that life's imperfections.
Yeah. I imagine that also if you're content to live with those imperfections, so to speak, to use that language, then when you're in a relationship, it can be a motivating factor to appreciate it more, I would assume.
In what way?
Well, if I know that something bad could happen at any moment here, and this thing that is the most important thing in the world to me, my, say, relationship with my children and wife, if there's a knowledge that the worst possible thing can happen, then it can be a motivating.
Yes. Every night when they go to bed, these little ones, you have Smurfs?
What's that?
You have little babies?
Yeah. Sorry.
I call them the Smurfs.
Yeah, I've got a 4-month-old and a 2.5-year-old.
Okay. You're in the midst of it.
Yeah.
This little Smurf at 4-month-old goes to sleep and you just think, it's just, your heart swells.
Oh, it's incredible.
Your heart swells and you just think, I hope nothing happens to you. Because I'm so aware that things could happen to you. And so I become so grateful, so moved, so tender, holding you because I know how small and fragile you are.
And is it self-centered of me to say I also think about myself, that something doesn't happen to me?
Of course.
It's like I've never really thought about it. It's just death was brought up before, but I'd never given it much thought, and as soon as I had my first child, I just started thinking about my own death a lot more.
Of course, because you want to be there for them.
Yeah.
Because you realize that you no longer are just on this planet as the child of someone, you are now the parent of someone, and that changes your place in the world categorically. Completely. They need you and you hope you will be there for them because you know that they can't live without you. We produce the most helpless species on the planet for 2 years before they can do anything by themselves.
Such a shame.
Great
if I could contribute more.
But I think that there is a whole other piece of perfection in relationships that I just had a conversation. I thought it was so interesting because you guys are in a relationship already and have been for a while. And so your questions come from that place. And I'm thinking about the people who are dating. I think this perfection stuff has really invaded the dating scene.
Yeah.
You know, so that you sit and you just don't want the slightest thing to irk you, or you get the ick factor and you basically cancel the person.
Yeah.
And that perfection thing, that you cancel the other, is also becoming internalized, so that you start to cancel yourself. At the slightest thing that you do wrong, in quote, or not according to your expectations, or not perfectly, you cancel yourself. And then you begin to be very anxious. And then you start to not be so kind to yourself. And then you begin to be more depressed. And then I feel that what you call the perfection industry has directly tied to the mental health crisis of this moment.
Yeah, of course.
So you're saying that the judgment, the way that we judge others when we're dating, we eventually start judging ourselves in the same...
Yes, we apply the same system to ourselves and to the others, which means that what this piece about perfection today is part of how capitalism has entered into romantic relationships. We measure ourselves like products. We are constantly evaluating ourselves. We discard, we replace, we change, we get a different one, a better one, a newer one, a younger one, a more pretty one, you name it. All of that pursuit of what is called perfection, which is directly tied to consumption, has entered the way we handle relationships. And I find that a much more
So then
troublesome.
at what point, we spoke to a guy called Oliver Berkman recently, who's an author, and he talked about the idea of settling.
Yeah.
And settling is a good thing. Of course, there are situations where you should not settle if there's something kind of dangerous or there's something within the relationship. But he talked about, and he doesn't claim to be any sort of dating expert or anything, but he was talking more about time management. His thing is time management. There's a small part in his book where he talks about dating. And he does it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but sort of not really, where he talks about settling because if you choose a partner and you commit to them long-term, that you will be forced to work through the troubles, and instead of just this sort of capitalistic way of approaching people and dating, where we just sort of go, oh, I'm sick of them now, or they're like Seinfeld, they're a close talker, or they're whatever, the little thing that's wrong with them, we'll use that as an excuse to get out and try and find the person who's better or perfect or has everything we need. How do you see that as far as when do you know when is the right time? What questions should we be asking ourselves as far as when should we stay, when should we go?
You've asked 4 questions in one, right?
Yeah,
So
we've got limited time.
So I'm going to swap this one around, and we're going to go like this. People used to marry in the 60s. At people in their 20s, 80% of people in their 20s were married.
Mm-hmm.
Today, 20% of people in their 20s are married, which means that we have gone from a cornerstone model of relationships to a capstone model of relationships. We have sexual and relationship dating and nomadism for 10 years before we settle, what you call settling. And that means that we also consider settling no longer just as settling, we consider it as having found my soulmate and my one and only.
Your 10-year journey of finding perfection sort of thing.
When I finally give up my dating app, when I finally settle, it's because I have found a person who is so phenomenal, oh so perfect, that they will be worthy of my finally stopping my nomadic, exploratory life.
Yes.
And that's a real myth. Because if you think that you settle or you make a choice because it's based on perfection, you are rather ill-prepared for the truth of life, which is massive amounts of imperfections. Shit is going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you think that you found a person with whom you're never going to feel alone, you're never going to be misunderstood, you're never going to be cheated on, you're never going to have them flake on you, etc., and you put all this credit into them, which they may or may not even know, you may be surprised that the bargain didn't really pan out. The bargain that you made with yourself, by the way.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, is one of the most beautiful switches I remember making is when I was working with couples around writing their vows. And vows these days, it's about many things people promise that are the loftier, the better. And I thought that one of the most realistic vows and best funny lines actually for a vows would be to say, I promise that I'm going to fuck up on a regular basis, and on occasion, I'll apologize about it.
Only on occasion.
That's imperfection for you.
That's great. That's perfect.
Set yourself up for, So now when you fuck up less, it becomes a real surprise and you can really delight in it.
That's actually an ideal affirmation to yourself, really, as much as it is to the other person.
Yes, because it says, I'm going to do all kinds of things that are going to be really upsetting. And I'm going to try to own them as best I can. Because that lets the other person know that you care about them, that you see them, that you see what you do to them, and that you're taking responsibility for trying to change it. That goes a long way in a relationship. So I look at imperfection from that angle. And your last question then becomes about when is it time to go? It's a very trap question because typically it is perceived as, it varies. If you are in a real bad situation that is oppressive, that is abusive, that is painful, that is trapping, that is controlling, that's one type of situation. If you are simply in a situation where you keep wanting your partner to be someone they're not, and you're just fed up because you can't clobber them enough like Moses and the rock that can't get water out of it, that's a very different situation. As a whole, when staying becomes more painful than leaving, you have a sense. If it's, I used to say people left because they were really unhappy. Today, people leave because they could be happier.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a very different, you ask me, the lens, the frame, the expectations is what is going to drive the way you ask about this. Have I done everything I thought I could to make it better? Have I taken responsibility for my part of the contribution? Do I realize that I chose this person for reasons that they may not even know, but that are no longer valid today?
That must be so common.
It's a thinking with yourself a lot more than just when do I give up on this person who is not satisfying all my needs.
The reasons that you got together with someone, the reasons that they don't even know.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like that's a really incredible. I never thought about. There's lots of things I've never
Person
thought about.
before you lied to me, cheated on me, and I promised to myself that I would never again be with someone that I thought would do this. So I banked on you being a real kind, decent human being who, at least one thing I know for sure, you were not going to cheat on me. That's a classic.
Yeah.
I chose you because you wanted family, and I was 30-something, and I wanted family. And for the rest, I really did not particularly connect with you, but I knew we shared the same goal, the same vision for family. And we have done that, and we've done that very well. But no, I've never particularly wanted to be with you. I've never been really drawn to you. I've never been attracted to you. I've not had no desire for you pretty much from the beginning. But I knew that I wanted to have a relationship, and so I basically, was okay in the beginning, but now I would rather you not touch me too often. And you feel it, and you know it.
And how do you bring that up? Because that's obviously where communication is key. Well, communication, I guess, is always key. But to talk about something like that,
I don't think one should ever say that to a partner. I've never been attracted to you.
Should never say that.
No. What's the point?
Yeah.
That's for you to deal with. You feel it. You don't feel it, you want to act on it, whatever it is that you need to decide on the basis of that. But you don't crush somebody's sense of self because of your own confusions. It's actually hostile. Wow, truth is not always kind. Truth can be cruel. And truth sometimes is more about me getting it off my chest than thinking about what it's going to be like for you to live with this truth.
I've often thought that that's part of being an adult is being able to hold on to some of those uncomfortable truths. I don't know if this is correct or not, but I've sort of felt that exactly your last point, that it sometimes can be more about if I just get this off my chest, it's going to make me feel better in the moment. Or
get it off your chest with somebody else.
Yeah.
Talk to a friend, talk to a therapist. But there are certain things that you, in sheer kindness, you don't just dump, because what can the person do with that? There are truths you want to share because the partner can do something about that. But to say, I'm with you, but I've never been attracted to you,
that's not helpful.
What can you do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't require, because the other person can't change.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't like your smell. What can I do with that? So one thing you can't change about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. You sort of brought up something before that I've never thought about. Exactly the same.
I like the fact that you guys.
There's a lot of things we've never thought about, obviously.
The comment makes it sound like we've thought of everything else except for this one thing.
One brilliant point. That so often people must enter these relationships and they have chosen the other person for a whole set of reasons that they've kept internally. And the other person might think they were chosen for a certain set of reasons to be in this relationship. So you begin the relationship with there's an external understanding of why we're together for whatever reason that is, whether we're into the same books and films or there's a sexual attraction or whatever it is. But then there's a whole set of internal reasons going on each side that's never discussed openly. And as time goes by, those initial attractions, for example, might fade or change, and then those internal things start to rise to the surface. I've never really thought of that before, but it must be incredibly common that people then go, well, why aren't you doing what I thought you're not playing your role that I had for me, but the other person, but the other person never knew the role. Or
that's correct. Or sometimes you're playing the role more than I would have hoped for, because you always get a little more than what you bargained for. So I really wanted a driven person who was going to work really hard and was going to take care of me. And so I am with a person who is working so hard. They're working so hard that I barely see them. And sometimes it's because they have to, and sometimes it's because they want to. So one of the nice, if you want, imperfections in love relationships is that the very thing that was initially attractive is often the very thing that becomes the source of conflict later.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you give me space. But now I'm like, I've had it with the amount of space you give me. I wish you would talk to me more often. I wish you would take initiative more often. I wish you would connect with me more often. I love the fact that, you are always somebody who wants to go on an adventure and explore. And now I'm like, I wish you'd sit home once in a while and not always want to do one more thing. I'm exhausted living with you.
It's an incredible point. I guess we all, as we've discussed, we take in expectations into relationships. But I'm kind of curious what happens when things arise that you didn't expect. So like and serious things like mental health issues, depression, anxiety, or anything really, even just low moods. What kind of strain does that put on a relationship?
I'm going to switch this one around. Because I think one of the very interesting things to know in relationships is that the person who doesn't feel well or who feels powerless or despondent is often the person who has the power.
How does that work?
Because the person who feels powerless is organizing the people around them. They activate them. And that is the thing that people don't say. The person who feels low, depressed or not depressed, but the person who feels low is activating everyone around them, their friends, their partners, to help to lift them. And that is power. To make other people work so hard to lift you is power. They don't think about it like that, and they feel powerless inside.
It's unconscious,
But interpersonally, in terms of the relationship system, they drive the ship. I try to lift you, but in the process of lifting you, I end up deflated and end up feeling like you. And so we all meet at the bottom. So how can I experience care that doesn't mean the burdensome, arduous task of having to lift you? Because otherwise I feel guilty or too alone that I'm continuing and doing my thing while you are stuck.
Unbelievable.
I mean, the power of the defeated is that they manage to make the people who do well end up feeling as defeated as them.
Yeah.
But they don't see it, and neither do the others. This is true if you have an alcoholic in the house, a depressed person in the house, an acting out teenager in the house, you name it. Is to understand the power that they have on a system. This is true in a company. One person can run a whole system like this.
Wow.
And so the first thing you really do is, what does it mean to care that is different from the kind of caring that I've done till now? Because your caring is becoming also more mixed with resentment and frustration, because it's the frustration of trying to make the other person feel better, and they don't. I've had this with some of my kids sometimes. I mean, this is a very common feeling. This is one of the daily imperfections in our lives, and in our relationships and in our family lives, that we don't talk about enough.
It's funny you should bring up that the power thing, because I've been prone to sort of low moods throughout my life, and I never realised. It was recently I got angry about something at home. I can't remember what it was. It was 4-month-old child, lack of sleep. Emotions are quick to come to the surface, and my wife said to me something like, "I really, even though I don't direct anger at her, I'm a good one to go out and hit an inanimate object in the backyard or something like that." And she said, "I really hate it when you get in these moods. It really, I hate it." And it was, I don't know what I was thinking, but up until that point, I never really considered that my moods could affect other people. I was like, this is my stuff. Like,
yes.
And I hadn't really. It was a revelation for me that I had that, and it's exactly what you're saying. It was power. I thought, here am I sulking and being angry in the corner.
Right.
I'm the small person in the room at the moment, and everyone else is going on and doing their thing and is flourishing and thriving.
Right.
But I had no idea that I had an effect on everyone else.
Yes, and that it's
space.
scary, and that she wouldn't want your little one to actually experience that kind of energy, because while she has somewhat learned to know that you're going to go hit the stuff and come back, a little one who experiences that kind of energy, it can be very frightening.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a real revelation when we think that the stuff, that when we hurt ourselves, we only hurt ourselves. That's a joke. When we hurt ourselves, we hurt the people that are right next to us.
The most important people.
Yeah. Well, usually the most important people. And they experience a real helplessness to make you, because they don't know how to stop that. So only you can. And then sometimes it's a good jolt to know my feelings, even when I go sulking. When you sulk, she's busy thinking about your sulking.
Yeah.
Your sulking has a umbilical cord attached to it.
It's got three umbilical cords now to the kid.
And I love when I have conversations about these things with the male partners, because it's less often said out loud. And the last thing you want to do is frighten your partner and your kids, which is why you exclude yourself and you think, I'm going to go deal with my rage elsewhere.
Thinking that they won't see it or notice it.
Right, but they do. And sometimes all it needs is, I'm going to go deal with my shit elsewhere. I'll be back. Because then they know that you're in control and that you're not going to harm yourself, etc., etc. As in, I'm going to break something and I'm going to just, break my hand in the process. Yeah,
that's true. It's signifying that there's an adult who's driving the ship here for this. Even though I need a moment, there is an adult in here. To go take care of my 9-year-old inside of me. Exactly, rather than just letting the 9-year-old take care. Yeah. Yeah, that's an incredible point.
Okay, so to do a slightly big U-turn around, this has just been incredible so far. We do one of the episode formats we do on our podcast is called the Vulnerability House, and in that tea house, we have guests come in and we have a deck of cards, and they pick a question. And the main reason you're here in Australia is because you are releasing what is a beautiful game called Where Should We Begin? A Game of Stories by Esther Perel. We've got it here, and you've gifted sets to us. That's all I'll be doing tonight. And and I just thought, I don't know whether it's like, I don't want to force the issue, but would it be worth like
Doing some cards.
pulling a card?
Can
Go
we do
ahead.
that? Are we
So,
allowed to?
how?
Who's pulling?
I don't know.
What do you think?
I think that we should all pull a card for the other.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
So is it like a random one or just choose one? Random one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll choose this for Josh,
Okay.
whatever that is. So that's for
Oh.
me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Josh.
What does it say?
The most humiliated I've ever felt.
Just, jeez.
This
Who
is.
chose those cards?
Oh wow. I mean, I'm conscious of. I have told this story before, but it all works quite well. So when I was, I'll tell it quickly because people have heard this before. I think it is the most humiliated I've ever been. I played music in my time and was in a band for years and trying to write music, and I had notes, lyrics in a notebook, and it was in a jacket at a party, and I didn't know any of the people there, and this guy just reached over and pulled the note back out. I'm like, what's this? And I said, I panicked because I knew what it was and said, this is my mate's jacket. I borrowed it. I don't know. And so he opened it up and started reading the lyrics and passed it to everyone in the circle to read the lyrics. And then it got to me and I was so embarrassed and humiliated that I played along and ridiculed my own lyrics to the people. The irony of this whole thing is that this night we're doing a live show later on in the year and we've been talking about this story and next year, sorry. And I have challenged myself because from that moment on I never wrote lyrics again, and I tried to write music but I just couldn't. It was too humiliating. It's too much. And so I've been trying to write lyrics and I wrote some. This is actually the notebook I've been using. So it feels very close to home because on the weekend I tried to write some and and it was such a traumatic experience again. Every line that went on the paper was, the judgment was coming in. And so I'm right in the middle of that at the moment. So it's interesting that's a really poignant case. That's
unbelievable
right now.
that came out.
Yeah.
Have you ever written with somebody else?
No, but it's interesting you should bring that up because in the process of writing, I thought, talking with Ryan and my brother and people we've worked on this podcast with, I find the discussion that incredibly stimulating and that interesting things and ideas, and I feel more free to talk and come up, and I feel like I come up with stuff in the moment there that I actually think isn't that bad, but then as soon as I'm by myself in the dark.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking literally about writing with others, because then the high court doesn't appear at every word you write saying this is stupid, this is ridiculous, how can you, nobody will ever.
Yeah, all those.
And you see this whole,
that's such an interesting idea.
theater of critics and their voices and their laughter at you and their shaming of you and all of that. Writing with somebody else can do a lot of good for the shame.
I guess it would enact a bit more kindness, wouldn't it? Because you're going to be inherently kind to them.
Well,
and
you can't go inside the theater of shame.
Yeah.
Because you're in conversation with somebody. So you're staying much more grounded in the moment.
Yeah.
Than being hijacked to this awful scene.
Yeah.
I can see it, what you described.
That's an incredible idea. Do you want to write lyrics together?
I'd love to. Wow. I was sitting here just resisting putting my hand up to offer.
I would love to write the lyrics with you.
Oh my God.
Wonderful.
Wow. We're on.
Because then you're in a different space. You can't at every word, and then the other person, no, that actually suits, at this
Someone
point
can
there's
break
no
that
room
circuit.
inside.
Yeah.
Yes, you need a circuit breaker.
Yeah. Well, working with Ryan has been a circuit breaker of my life because I've always been quick to judge myself, and it was his input and his success outside the podcast, his genius, if you don't mind me using that word.
I don't mind.
That has allowed me to just be a bit kinder to myself in trying to create and trying to do things. So I think you'd be the perfect person if you'd.
I'll be honoured.
So
okay, next card.
Where should we begin? A game of stories.
Yeah.
It's not just a card game.
Okay.
It really believes that relationships are stories, that we tell our life through our stories, like you just did.
Yeah.
This was a compelling story. And if I don't know you, I've learned so much about you from this moment, from this one situation and of how you take a poet and slash him, because writing lyrics is being a poet. And I wanted to create a game in the pandemic that would allow us to connect, to be curious, to communicate with people, to experience the intimacy that comes through stories, not answers to questions, but stories about ourselves that are provoked by these cards.
Yeah.
And you can do it when you go home.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it with your friends. You can do it with each other as a team at work. You can do it on a first date. It's the real meeting of people is to ask the right questions that then bring you to be invited into all their inner neighborhoods. Funny, light, and deep, all of the above. So, which one did you get?
The last time I got unreasonably upset. ... So the last time, I spend some of my time out in the country, and there's lots of wombats, and we have a wombat living under our house right now, and it's every time we mention it to someone in the area, like the farmers around the area, they go like, "Oh God, that's no good." And every time someone says that, I get more panicked and worried about this wombat. And just last week, because it's still there, and we've tried all these things to try and deter it away, and we can't. They're very territorial animals, and they're cute. They're great, but they can do a lot of damage to the house. And so last week, I got really unreasonably upset about this wombat. I really resent this wombat under the house, and it feels it's so tough because it's one of these things. It's like I can't do anything. I don't know what to do. I can't control it. It's stressful, and I got really unreasonably upset about it last night.
Is that an understatement?
Yeah. I had high anxiety. I'm not someone who gets high anxiety that often, but often it's about stupid things like this. Like it doesn't. I mean, yes, it matters to a certain degree, but not to the degree where I built it up.
That's why it's unreasonably upset.
Exactly. So yeah, that was me last week.
Answer.
The last time I felt like an imposter.
Oh, good one.
I've told the story, but it is really the last one, and it sticks to me. For Where Should We Begin, the podcast, I do one-time therapy sessions with anonymous couples for 3 hours, and who are not patients, never have been. And most of the time, the 80 episodes we have in the last 7 years, we only have one episode that we didn't air. But last year, I did a session that was really not a good session. I had a bad day too, and I lost it with the people.
You got angry at them?
I got angry at them, at her primarily, at them. I started scolding them. Like I just couldn't get them to change and move enough. So anyway, it's terrible therapy.
Wow.
And I thought, but I knew it. I saw it. It's not, but I thought, I'm going to air this. I'm going to air it anyway, because I think people should know that not every session is always, a very good session. And mind you, they still thought it was very helpful. They didn't have the experience I had. They thought finally somebody told us things as it is. None of the other people have spoken straight. But I just thought this is terrible therapy. But the hardest thing that made me feel like an imposter was to bring this to my colleagues.
Yeah.
And to say, I want to discuss this session because I really want to understand, why did I lose it like this? What happened to me? And I really thought this was the main thing that accompanied me the whole time. Is this, I was so glad that this happened to me now, because if this had happened to me 30 years ago, I wouldn't have slept for weeks.
Yeah.
I would have been ruminating. How could I do this? How can I be a therapist? And now I had a bad day and I had a terrible session, and that happens all the time. Rather than I am so bad and I shouldn't do this thing and all of that stuff. And I hadn't had that kind of feeling in a long time. So it was a nice experience of imposter, which meant that I didn't too much feel like an imposter. I just felt like it's okay to fuck up on occasion.
Yeah.
Imperfections.
Yeah, we've all got them.
Do you, if you don't mind me asking, It's a strange way to start a sentence if you don't mind me asking. I'm about to ask it anyway. Do you see a therapist yourself?
Today, no, but I have many times.
Yeah,
of course.
You're not regularly. It's because I always think this about therapists and psychologists. God, that was tricky. Psychologists, psychotherapists. Because I immediately think of The Sopranos. You know, I think about Melfi seeing Peter Bogdanovich, whatever his name was, and that I was like, oh wow, of course, yeah. Therapists are people. They see.
Of course, we see people. We see therapists and we see supervisors who supervise us as a therapist and also at what gets elicited in us on a personal level. I've many times. I think that it's a must. It's a must for a therapist to have had the experience on the other side. Like it's a must for a doctor to have been a patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Was not a difficult question. Do you ever ask a baker if they eat bread?
I wouldn't dare.
Or someone else's bread, maybe.
I wouldn't want to cross the line. Well, Esther, unless Josh, you have anything else you wanted to...
I have so many questions, but they're...
Throw in one more.
I just want to know, it's a story that I've been experiencing recently, and I wanted to know how common this is, basically. I'll paint a scene. My wife and I put the children to bed. We sort of split up and one takes one takes the other, switch it over. Ideally with this dream of, okay, we're going to get to the couch at 8 o'clock. We'll switch on a TV show together, decompress, go to bed. That's the ideal. Usually it'll happen at a different rate though. So someone will finish first. They're sitting on the couch on their phone, flicking through Instagram or something like that. The other person will arrive, see them on the couch on the phone, go, all right, well, I'll jump on the phone too, I guess. And then before you know it, 50 minutes has gone past and we're both sitting there isolated and siloed in these corners on the couch. And then it's sort of, we should probably go to bed. We're going to get up 3 times during the night. Is that common? I think it is, but how common is that? And I've started to be a bit scared about what's the cost on a relationship of that kind of behaviour long term.
I'm glad you ask. Because on the list of what your kids need, upkeep of the two of you should be high up on the list. If you deprioritize the couple and you give everything to the kids, you put the relationship at risk, which means you put the family at risk, because the only reason families stay together these days is because the couples do well. But you have a 4-month-old and this is also normal. Okay, so you need to put yourself in context. You know, I think it's called ambiguous loss, what you're talking about. Ambiguous loss is a term that was originally used by Pauline Boss to talk about people who have Alzheimer, for example, and they are still physically present, but they're psychologically gone.
Okay.
Or people who are deployed, who are physically absent, but emotionally present. When you're sitting on the couch next to someone who's scrolling away, or you are scrolling away, and it's not really clear, are you here or are you gone? That's what makes it ambiguous.
Yeah.
And loss means, do I grieve your absence or do I actually claim your presence? So it's really important that you agree together and that you don't just do this once a week on date night. Tonight, whoever finishes first chooses the thing we're going to watch, prepares the setting, puts the music, creates the light, and we make sure that the other one comes as fast as possible. And we make the time for ourselves. We've just done a whole ritual for the kids to go to bed. What we are doing is sapping all the energy out of us. That numbness that then creeps in, just sitting and then say, let's go to bed. Of course, you're exhausted and you're going to need to get up 3 times. But you could just sit together for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
With us, turn off the light, listen to good music together, whatever you do, drink something, smoke something, whatever you do. But it's the intentionality, it's the actual declaration. Now us, it's our play date, our time together. We're going to acknowledge each other. We're going to sit, maybe we have nothing to say because we really are spent. Yeah. Then we just lie next to each other and, and we hold hands. But There is nothing else in the space at this moment but us.
Yeah.
With TV, without TV, whatever it is. And I think what is really important is to frame it, to declare it, to make it conscious, willful, premeditated, rather than to think it's just going to happen, because it will not happen just like that. It's only because you make it happen. And when you make it happen, you declare the importance of the relationship.
Yeah.
This is true if you have babies, if you have demanding jobs, if you have a sick mother you need to attend to, or whatever it is that is part of what two people need to manage in the Management Inc.
Yeah, because I guess that's just how it will be for your whole life. There's always going to be something that a crisis or something that's happening that will demand that attention.
You have a
so
particular
you need to fight
stage.
back.
You have 5 years. You have, the first 5 years until the second one is 3. That's a particular time in the story of a couple. All couples, straight, queer, all couples. And you really want to make sure to preserve some energy for the relationship. Yeah. Maybe it actually is we will have dinner alone together. And then you set the table. You don't stand at the counter. And then you put a candle if need be. And you just say, okay, let's sit. And the whole meal can be 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be a massive production. No. But the frame says, now us. We still exist. And we attend to us. And we feed the relationship. It's really important.
That's incredible. I can't wait to set
Get
the frame
home
tonight.
I hope the kids go to sleep.
I know. No, it's setting the intention.
Sometimes it's just sitting on the stoop.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you happen to have someone in the house, it's about taking a walk around the block.
It does, yeah, but you're right. It's not really the activity. It's the declaration of the intention that our relationship matters.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's totally understandable that you have nothing much in the tank at the end of these days. But the next thing is, don't do date night. Do mornings or lunches. When you are actually awake, dressed up, and energized.
Very good tip.
This is not the stage to do date. I mean, the end of the day, people are,
Yeah.
But when you look at lunch, people sitting with each other and talking and being totally engaged, and so you always wonder how many of these people are here with their partners. Obviously, they have it in them. They just don't have it at the end after they've put the kids to sleep and done all the.
Yeah.
So, say, once a week, twice a week, we have breakfast together. We actually, if you can, if you are self-employed like you seem to be, you go and you start work an hour later.
Yeah.
And you go and have breakfast together when you wake up.
That's a great idea.
Rather than this date night thing, it's a great idea, but not at every stage.
Yeah, it's trying to force something into a time that's just not going to work. Yeah.
And then half the time people spend time talking about Management Inc. while they're sitting in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So don't do the dinner either. Do other things that involve movement, music, dancing, hiking, stuff that involves the body as well. So there is energy.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I was going to be so excited by this advice. It's going to be great.
Esther Perel had a little chat with my partner.
Well, Esther, thank you so much for your time. The game is not available yet, but you can go on a waiting list.
The game is on Australian territory. It has arrived.
It's arrived.
It has arrived.
Yep.
We will be releasing it very soon. And so you just go to the waiting list.
Yep.
So we know that you have claimed the game.
Great.
Because there's already many claims.
Well, we'll put the link in the show notes, so you'll be able to go to it straight away. And I'm lucky I've already got one, but otherwise I'll be putting my name down. Esther, thank you so much.
There's a show tonight.
Oh, there's a show tonight, of course.
The day this is coming out. So there's a show. It's at the Convention and Exhibition Centre in Brisbane. This is Thursday the 1st. And then on Saturday the 3rd of December, you have a show in Sydney at the Coliseum, and you can get tickets at tegdainty.com, tegdainty.com.
Yes, the last two.
The last two shows. Last two shows in the
Everything else
country.
has been sold out.
Of course.
And so we've just added another Sydney show.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is just about to be sold out too.
Yeah.
And we play all of us, thousands of us.
Oh, I can
Sounds
imagine.
incredible.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking to us on the Imperfects.
My pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If this episode has been triggering for you, we strongly recommend Lifeline on 131114. The Imperfects is hosted and co-produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Brian Shelton and Josh Van Cuylenberg. This episode was produced by Bridget Northeast, filmed by Andy Poole, and edited by George Martin. A special thanks to Dr. M for her expertise and guidance. We'd also like to thank the Resilience Project for their ongoing support.